Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Bright Talks London office and to our presentations this morning on our summit on lead generation and nurturing strategies for growth. I'm delighted to be able to bring you three good talks this morning. We're going to be starting shortly with Phil Ball from CleverTouch. If you're watching online, then please use the opportunity to ask a question. Just use the question tab. I can't guarantee our speakers will get a chance to get back to you today, but I personally guarantee they will reply in person if they don't get a chance. So please submit your questions. And also for our online audience, please rate the presentation and feel free to share the content with any colleagues. You'll be able to access all the slides on the attachment tab as well. And obviously, this will be available on demand for you to revisit at any time. And that goes for our live audience as well. So, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Phil Ball from CleverTouch.
Thanks very much, Andy. Thank you very much, Andy. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the event. So, my presentation is going to contrast and compare the different technologies between financial services and tech markets. So, without further ado, so the agenda really is to provide continual growth and understand how you're going to drive that within your own organisation. The second is around building a demand generation engine and making sure you use the technologies around you and your infrastructure to drive that demand engine. Also, we want to think about why we're going to change and why you need to bring new thinking to the organisation from maybe outside of your industry. And the fourth point is about organisational design and change. Some of the things we're going to be doing are going to require some change in your organisation, some different skills that you will need to apply to learnings. Okay, so a little bit about us. We are a marketing automation consulting business, been around 10 years now. We're the leaders in the market in Europe, and in fact, we're Marketo's International Partner of the Year. And as you can see from the logos, we've got a diverse range of companies in different verticals and different markets and different sectors. And we take the learnings from each of those markets and apply them to each of the businesses we service. And that gives us a really good understanding of how we can take learnings from each of those practices and bring them to new markets and bring them to new thinking to our customers. Okay, so a little bit of history. So financial services have been around a huge amount of time, 150 plus years. The first fund was launched actually by Foreign and Colonial back in 1868, and the investment business now is some 400 companies strong and represents about $17.5 billion a year of revenue globally. So it's a big market. On the other hand, technology has been around in Silicon Valley for not half as long. And the thing is, in Silicon Valley at the time that the financial services market was mature, is they were still digging for gold, and it was really about prospecting and making money and farming. So Silicon Valley is a lot older. Now I'm going to compare the demographics moving forward in time. They're very similar in terms of their size and shape in terms of revenue and GDP as well, and jobs. However, if you look at the demographic between females and males, there's a real clear distribution, and finance are winning out in that equality there in that market. So well done, financial services. However, if you look at the tech market, there are hubs springing up outside of London. A lot of that is down to skills and where they lie in the regions, but also the ability to reduce their costs and use the infrastructure that's available from the tech hubs. People like Oracle and other businesses who've set up outside the company, dragging in those technical skills and expertise, together with the industry around IT supporting those innovations. Okay, so what's happening in each job in the market? So what we've observed is that in financial services, it's all about the brand, whereas in technology, it's all about the leads. And those of you who work in the tech space will recognise that. It's all about lead gen and the sales guys getting their demand. If we look at the other side of things, we're being told by the guys who work with us in financial services that they're driven by sales. They're very reactive. They're driven by events that sales guys decide are going to happen. Whereas in technology, it's very much a collaborative and supportive engagement where both sides are working collaboratively to drive the common goal and objective. So why different? So if I look at CRM as an indicator, and digital MarTech stack, and there's huge amounts of MarTech stack now available, and we'll talk about that later. In terms of the financial services market, it's really seen as CRM is seen as a dumping ground for data. It's also seen as an IT project in many instances that we've come across. Whereas if I look across to technology, CRM is business critical. It's the way they run their organization. It's the way they run their forecasting. It's the way they get to the detail. But also, if I look at the CRM in financial services, what marketeers are telling me and what sales are telling me in that organization is pretty meaningless. It doesn't really drive a whole lot of change and give a lot of insight to the business. Whereas if I look inside technology, it's mission critical to their organization. They couldn't do without it, they couldn't run their organization, and they couldn't manage where they're going in the future in terms of predicting their forecast and their revenue. So very different contrast there. So where are the cadences? Well, in financial services, you saw from my earlier slide, it's a very established, mature market with some great policies, processes, and procedures to control that compliance, that order, that rigor. However, if I look at the time scale that people work within, it's typically used for lifetime value. So they're looking at a longer horizon. Whereas if you look at technology, they're very much quarterly driven business. And those of you who work in a tech firm will recognize that completely. It's quarterly driven and everybody's looking at that horizon. So it's a very different feel to the way people are measured and monitored and the way sales and marketing interact together. Also, if I look at the time to execution in this particular one, in the financial services industry, it's a very considered environment. It's a very cautious market. People want to do things right. They don't want to upset the apple cart. They don't want to destroy their reputation or their revenue or their customer base. So they're very cautious. Also, they typically have a much wider stakeholder team to get around than IT. However, if you look at the technology side of things, it's now, it's instant, it's got to be done. The time to execution is much faster. They tend to put a bigger team together. They tend to drive to value much quicker in that respect. And as a result, you see better time to execution and recognizing that revenue much earlier in the cycle. And we've seen that from some technology disruptors who are coming into the FS market as well, who are bringing that fintech side of things. Okay, in terms of acquisition, we see there's a few acquisitions going on with inside the FS market, but not as much consolidation and collapsing as you'd think, given the size and shape of the market and the age of the market. Whereas if you look at the acquisition side in terms of the tech market, there's acquisitions going on all the time. And I'd like to congratulate Marketo on their recent acquisition into Adobe, which was a fabulous replication of their model. 13 times revenue, great number, well done, guys. If we look at is marketing understood and valued, a bit of a controversial statement. I'm not saying this myself, I'm not a marketer, I'm just saying this from customer feedback that we've seen. Compliance is part of the DNA in any marketing organisation within inside a financial services organisation. You know, you've got Sarbanes-Oxley, you've got Basel, you've got MiFID, and now you've got GDPR. Won't cover that one again today. It does, however, consolidate the thinking around what you can do around your customers and the data and how you can use that, which is a good thing. So it does give that discipline. If I look at the other side of the technology stack, privacy is a much higher currency for those guys now than it was before GDPR, and it's starting to become more relevant in terms of the segmentation, targeting positions of each audiences. If I look at marketing in financial services, they excel in content, video, and brochures and fact sheets. Fabulous job at telling stories. If I look at the side of the market in terms of technology companies, it's very much about products. It's very much about how do we get this product to market quicker? How do we market the new product? How do we disrupt the market? How do we bring new thinking to the market on our product sets? So we see that disruption. And to my point at the bottom here is, you know, revolution is not encouraged inside financial services. It's pretty stable, don't upset the apple cart. Whereas in the tech space, they're all about disrupting their own markets. They're all about bringing out the next thing. And if you look at mobile phones as an example, Apple have done a stunning job at disrupting the market with their technology initially and then bringing out the next version of iPhone every time and grabbing that new source of revenue and that new customer base. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my terms of reference here. But as you think about these things that you're applying, obviously you're in different markets. You'll need to apply your own thinking to how you do this within your business because they will be very different depending on where you are in your journey and also depending what market you're in. So, first one, proving contribution to the business. So we like to think of marketeers as changing from the back office to the boardroom. It's marketing are becoming way more relevant now as people are starting to interact more digitally with your content and starting to track that engagement. Don't be like some organisations. We've all seen the MarTech logos where there's, you know, hundreds of thousands of companies now producing the MarTech stack for the marketeers, and there's a wealth of opportunity. What I'd say is establish the spine, the core infrastructure you need. That's CMS, the marketing automation platform, and the CRM, and then build out from there. Establish a lead process for your organisation. Get that cadence, get that pace, understand what's happening within your leads and your data, and make sure you understand what's happening. If you build a MarTech stack like the one on your left there, and I don't like to pick on BlackRock, it was just a great example of hundreds of sprawling technologies there, the data would be impossible to manage. Okay, building a demand engine. So, in financial services, marketing still produce a huge amount of content. A lot of it isn't used really. We see a lot of organizations produce huge amounts of content, but they don't really repurpose it and use it for generating revenue, and there's a lot of wasted money. Whereas in tech space, they really utilize their assets really well. So I'd recommend that you look at 5 things really. Look at a layered sales model. That really works well. If you look at the Challenger sales model, that's what that recommends there. So functions in terms of research, your rep, and your consulting salespeople. Depending on how you go to market, those models will vary, but it's a good established way of getting the different levels and progression for your own sales guys. A blend of sales and marketing approach. Now, if you've got a target account-based marketing plan, you've got to have a sales target account selling plan to complement that. And then make sure you're providing relevance to each of those markets based on content you're serving and the data and the segments. The other thing that I'd say is move away from transactional campaigns. We see way too much of this where people are just sending email after email and email. Make the journeys intelligent, make them engaging, make them relevant to the audience. Make sure you're not just spamming people with stuff that's not relevant to them, and you'll get a much better return and engagement in your content. The other thing I'd say is the charts on the right here are some of our own charts for our own business. We run this thing called a powwow. Myself, Adam, and Nick, who are founders of the business, we come from IBM, and the cadence around deal inspection, deal reviews, and cadence around forecasting was actually drilled into us. So we run our own business on the back of powwows. That gives me the ability to hold marketing account to the leads they're giving sales, and sales accounts to their ability to close business based on these high quality leads they're delivering. So some of these things here around marketing qualified accounts by source, marketing qualified leads, MQAs by result, and then further down the stack, how are each of the regions performing against their targets? As a business owner, I need to know where I'm going to invest, where we're going to put the resources, and what skills I need to meet the demands of the market and the skills of our customers. So it's about giving predictability to the board where I can see what's coming up next. Okay, so why drive new change and new thinking? The old model of marketing was very much the top of the funnel, the awareness piece, and you've probably all seen this diagram. I've seen it in somebody else's presentation later as well. It's marketing's job now to become the antenna to the market, to become relevant and remain sticky throughout the sales cycle. Your responsibility to move things further down the funnel and get that engagement consistent in your customers and your prospects is absolutely critical. It's sales jobs to actually get the meeting and close the business and report upon that business. So the funnel has changed in its shape and size. And with the technologies like Marketo, with its needs nurturing capability, and BrightTalk for generating demand and content, you can really move the dial in that respect. And I'd recommend 3 books there to read as well as a takeaway. Okay, organizational design. We see a lot of organizations who go into deploying a technology or changing the way they're working, and they don't think about the organization which is going to support the change and who's going to be in that change, how are we setting up that committee, who goes first if it's a global business, what are the first priorities. So we have a very mature way of looking at this with our customers and taking on a journey. We look at things in terms of the Kotter model. It's very clear, it gives you a really good direction, and you can articulate to the business what you're doing in some very clear steps of progression. We then bake this in with a fully locked and loaded project plan that's fully costed as well when we do our engagements. So create the conditions for change, make sure everybody knows what you're doing, over-communicate what you're doing. Introducing new practices and new processes is absolutely fundamental. If you do what you did was saying before, it's never going to work, so introduce new change. And then maintain the momentum. If you're doing a digital transformation program, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Don't run out of energy. Plan it properly. Put the right resources on. If you run too quickly, you will fall. Start simple and layer over complexity as you go forward. If you look at what Microsoft did, they looked at a traditional model and then they applied a digital model. And what they did was they made sure that they changed the way they were working, not only with the technology they were using with BrightTalk and Marketo, but also their internal policies and procedures, their lead processes, their life cycle, the way they engage with their customers. So it really transformed the way. And of course, they got massive increases in revenue as a result of this model. So we've got to think about failure as well. This came up actually a couple of years ago from one of our customers called Eaton, a lady called Nina Bennett. She's an absolute visionary. She works in a company that sells everything from air conditioning to aircraft material to engineering, big engineering projects. And they've been doing a marketing automation project, and we helped them to get it back on track. And one of the things that she did in a presentation she gave was she wanted people to understand why these projects fail. It's never about the technology, it's always about other things. So I just share these things with you. Lack of vision, have a plan, right? Make sure everybody knows what it is. Get the resources and get the training in place, really critical to do so. Get the stakeholders bought in as well as the casual users. That's absolutely critical. Everybody is bought into the dream and the vision. And call it high. Don't sit in the middle management. Call it very high because it will touch every area of the organisation as you change. Make sure you standardise on certain things. Events is a brilliant one. Standardise on the events process. Standardise on reporting around those. Standardise around data. And then you'll get consistency and you'll get efficiencies and scale. Also, I'd say cultural change is one of the hardest things. And I've talked about this earlier in the presentation around change in financial services is slow. Some of the audience here are my customers and they will know that pain themselves. Tech companies don't have that so much of a problem. They just bash forward and get on with it. Nevertheless, you can't take those soft skills away from the equation when you're deploying stuff. You're dealing with people, there'll be changes in their jobs and skills they're required to adopt. So cultural change is really important. And skills are difficult to build. You know, you're going to be asking people to do different things, so focus on a career for them and make sure they've got some direction there that they can see and they can grasp and they say, yeah, I really want to be part of this vision. It's going to help my career, it's going to help the business, and it's going to help me personally be a better contribution to the organisation. Okay, so that's me. Now I'd like to introduce Simon Mott, and Simon's going to give you his view on the confessions of an ETF marketeer. Simon, welcome.
Okay, thank you, Phil, very much for that introduction. Thank you all for being here. I've got about 15 minutes. In about 14 minutes' time, you'll probably understand why I don't do a lot of public speaking. But I was invited to come here today because we work very closely with both BrightTalk, Marketo, and the team at CleverTouch. And given the build-out that we've been trying to do at Han ETF over the last few months, I thought it'd be an interesting case study to kind of look at that perspective and see kind of how we approached really kind of doing things a little bit differently in our world. So just a little bit about me, just to introduce myself. Been marketing the financial services kind of arena for about 15 years, largely in the ETF space, but have covered quite a lot of other areas, OTC credit and so on. Spent about 7 years at a very big organisation, which was London Stock Exchange Group. About 8 years there, ended up running globally the ETF and wealth management marketing. Time for something new, and a really great new opportunity came up. It's an opportunity that as marketers you don't get very often, and that was a fresh company, a completely blank slate, and a great opportunity to build from scratch without the headaches of the legacy systems, the old technologies, trying to back things into each other. And that's a horrible, clunky process if anybody's gone through that. And it's really a nightmare when you're dealing with a lot of old school systems and a lot of old school processes that weren't designed for scale and weren't designed for the type of information that we as marketers want. So how often do you get the chance to build something from the ground up? And also, how often do you get the opportunity to build from the ground up in a very high growth industry and with some visionary leadership that actually invests in marketing and recognizes the need within our industry, the asset management ETF industry, to do things differently. As a small company, we can't afford to behave in the same way that other people did, and we also don't think that's the way to go and to build for the future. So while we've only been going for about a year, and hopefully you'll be seeing some big news from us in the coming days, we've got a tremendous amount of experience in the marketplace. But with a very concentrated team, we've got to be agile and smart and nimble. And so given the project to build out a different type of marketing technology infrastructure, create a new brand that will kind of fit well and allow us as a provider of investment propositions to kind of talk to the market in a different way, because I really agree with a lot of what Phil kind of covered in the last speech. Asset management as a whole, no offense guys, but I think we all recognize this hasn't been that brilliant and hasn't been that creative and hasn't been that engaging. I think we all kind of struggle to figure out kind of how to navigate that and do things in a better way. So obviously the contrast from moving from London Stock Exchange Group, thousands of people, incredible infrastructure like they have in this building with TV studios and event spaces and large teams of people that you can leverage, to a team of 5 people. When I joined, we're now at about 15 people. That's certainly a cultural change, right? You have to be aware of. The infrastructure, went from, we don't have anything, Simon, this is what you're here to do, you've got to build this stuff, right? So addressing Phil's point that there's an overwhelming kind of intimidating level of choice when you kind of approach things fresh. We needed to be able to kind of cut through that pretty quickly and get the kind of technologies in place that were going to add value to us, not overkill and over-complex the technology stack, and do something which we as a smaller company could maintain, but with a vision to grow and scale pretty dramatically kind of in future. Obviously, without a team in place, and I'm hiring, so we're starting to build that out. So without a team in place, we also needed something that was kind of fairly controllable and could be managed, but managed by a small team. And it also allows us, as we build, to focus those marketing resources and those people who join us into more higher value activities. So they don't have to spend most of their days doing those time-sucking, brain-numbing kind of activities of exporting this out of that and putting this in here to try and create the kind of reporting and create the type of conversations you want to have internally. We can make that a push-button exercise, freeing up the team's time to do kind of more interesting, higher value exercises. And so that kind of future view was important for me to be able to build in early. But regardless of whether we're at a big company or a very, very small company, I think there's common challenges that we all face in financial services or asset management. It's really hard in this environment, which is so overwhelmed with messages and media, to kind of cut through the noise, right? I think that everybody recognizes that in their personal life, let alone when you're trying to sell investment propositions or financial services or infrastructure. It's tricky to make that engaging sometimes, right? And it's especially tricky to make that engaging in the hundreds of great pieces of content we now see scrolling through our LinkedIn feeds every day, right? So that attention grabbing this is something I really asked my brand agency to kind of look at and how we can stand out. Now, anybody who's kind of now going on to hanetf.com is going, well, what are you talking about, Simon? So this project is in flight at the moment, and I think we'll be coming back and doing one of these again next time to kind of give you a sense about how that went and kind of share that experiences, but we're on the cusp. The other thing we really needed to focus on here was reporting. The platform that we offer at HanETF enables third-party asset managers to launch exchange-traded funds into Europe. So the reporting I wanted to generate wasn't just for my own internal purposes, it was also to share to those on-platform clients who are entrusting us to promote their products for them, to show that we're deploying properly. And again, we didn't want to have to do a lot of customization around that, right? We wanted standardized metrics where we could understand from a partner to partner, client to client kind of campaign how things were shaking out. And so to Phil's point, a lot of that kind of standardization, a lot of that kind of templating has been built in kind of from the start to make life easier down the road. As I said, we had this kind of horrible but luxurious kind of problem about kind of where do I get started, right, with all of these options. And if you haven't really had the necessity to think about it, you're kind of aware of it, but how do you approach this volume, right? So we had to, obviously didn't have time to kind of go through and do diligence on the whole lot, right? So this is where we needed to get a specialist in. And after searching around a little bit, we came across Phil Ball through an introduction. And we had a very great conversation, and I described kind of what I was looking to do at HanETF. And I think Phil was excited to help. So we've been working with a team at CleverTouch really for, how long is it, Phil, now? 4 or 5 months now, working on this project. And if you're not a client and you're thinking about kind of moving in this area, and sadly I'm not getting paid for this, but I do recommend go and talk to Phil, because they certainly know what they're doing, and the type of kind of advice and recommendations really kind of help you think differently about how you're going to build things and how you're going to approach. So when I was, again, everything we're building is going to be motivated towards certain business goals, right? It's interesting when Phil put the contrast up earlier on. But if we're thinking about kind of lead generation, I think the first important thing is define what that is, right? What is a lead going to mean to you? I mean, I think all of us in the past have had probably experiences, if we've been around long enough, where the throttle is either too wide or too narrow, and the sales teams are not getting the type of quality engagements they're looking for, right? And that's been a failure on us as marketers. But we now have the tools necessary to stop these issues happening, right? And so we can be much more intelligent in the way we kind of pass off materials to our business development, our relationship management, and our sales team, making their use of time more efficient. And that builds confidence in the marketing process, right? Because they don't see a lot of wasted time. They understand that what you're delivering to them has value to them and to the business. So that was critical. I've mentioned the scalability. That comes through automation. I'm not going to have a gigantic team of people, 50, 60 people in marketing anytime soon. But in order to be able to serve, let's say, 15 on-platform clients by the end of next year with a defined team, that needs a rapid scalability, that needs rapid development of kind of templating, and you need to be able to automate a lot of these campaigns. And again, it's been a great experience actually with Marketo and BrightTalk and CleverTouch working kind of in symphony to do that for me. I agree with Phil, we have to be multimedia these days. It's kind of a no-brainer. And we have to be multi-platform and deliver content to people where they're already going. We can't suck people into our environments. And we need to be able to kind of build out kind of tracking and reporting that allows us to kind of monitor that. It's easy to do it when they're in your own website or within your own real estate. It's a bit harder to understand where the engagement with your content is in third-party areas. But again, technology is providing us solutions for that. So we can build a much more rounded view of our clients, across their activity, across devices, wherever they are going to be. And of course, we want to be intelligent and, too many buzzwords, excuse me, but we need kind of metrics that we can improve from, right? Not ones that just look good. We want to be able to kind of, constantly improve because we know the market's going to eat us if we don't adapt. So the scalability kind of came across full campaign automation, a lot of communications, events management, as Phil said, is a great thing that we can automate because that was always a thing that took up a lot of time in people's lives. Smart campaigns and smart client support, and we can now do this very, very neatly. So kind of what this kind of shakes out into is an ability to build up that rounded view of your client's activity through looking at the engagement across your assets and across your real estate that allows you to change in fairly close to real time the kind of information you're serving up to them. So if people's priorities have changed, if their interests have moved on, you're not just in this campaign for the next quarter, right? And tough luck whether you're enjoying it or not, right? We can now move people dynamically between content, between materials and between campaigns based on their behavior. And I think that's super powerful because it means we're more relevant. So smarter delivery and smarter tracking. And of course, then the challenge is on us and the content agencies we work with to kind of get that excitement, move people down that sales path. So time is moving, so we'll roll through scoring. I think everybody's going to have their own scoring models, right? And that's completely dependent on your business, and it's worth spending a lot of time thinking about that up front. A couple of interesting features kind of we wanted to build in was that dynamic resets. So again, we're going to either change people's kind of engagement metrics in fairly close to real time based on what they're doing. And we're also going to negative score people as well because that helps choke that pipeline down to a manageable level for the salespeople and cut out a lot of that wastage. So again, a lot of people don't consider kind of negative scoring in the leads. Now, of course, we're here on webinar, and webinars have been a kind of real core part of the marketing I did when I was at the London Stock Exchange, holding events of up to about 400 or 500 people pretty regularly, right? So we loved BrightTalk a lot there because we could do the scale, and also because we could trust it, and the thing didn't fall over on us, a lot. And that's really important for me. But they've moved on so much from there. with the integration, the native integrations with Marketo, the way it kind of feeds into our Salesforce. We love the information and the intelligence we get out of the webinars versus actually above physical events, because we're seeing the real-time engagement, we're seeing what people are doing with the assets we're putting out there. It feeds into our marketing automation process, and it really builds that level up. So we're running all our reporting kind of through Marketo as our single point of reference, as our kind of golden copy speaking to Salesforce. So it's not a technology stack, Phil, which is very complex. Phil talked about building the spine. This is what we've developed. We have Salesforce as our CRM system. We're working with Marketo on the automation, integrating BrightTalk, integrating a limited amount of social media, compliance, right? But certainly LinkedIn. We have a number of support functions there. And it's been stitched together very expertly and actually with really fantastic support by Phil and the team. So I hope that's been useful. It's just an insight into some thinking after 15 years in the business. But certainly this kind of confluence of finance and technology isn't just happening in startup challenger brands. It's happening kind of inside our own businesses as well. And hopefully that's going to make us smarter, get us more resources as marketers in the future, so we can go out there and do that kind of exciting stuff that we all want to do, and less of the kind of manual grind. So thank you.